I was watching the news the other day when I saw a story about a girl who had lost her limbs in a train accident. There was nothing pleasant about it. And naturally, she seemed very depressed, as anybody would be had they just been run over by a train. But the reporters were doing nothing to help. They were talking about all the things that she would now have difficulty doing, such as finding a job and living at home. It was almost as if they were mourning her death. And then someone in the room said, "I would rather be dead than have that happen to me." Now imagine if someone said this about you. How would you feel? This really bothered me because I've been an amputee my whole life. And it was reassuring me that society has a stigma we associate with disability, which suggests that disability is nothing more than a terrible, sad way to live. And I realized if someone would rather be dead than be like me, there couldn't be anything worse than disability. But I think this is complete crap. I reckon there are many things that are worse than disability. Have you ever seen reality TV? There's a blind athlete that I train with who actually suggests that one of the advantages of being blind is not having to see Kim K's side boob. And just for good measure, what else is worse than disability? Toronto Maple Leafs. Yeah. You see, I've been an amputee my whole life, a partial left-hand amputee with a bit of a shorter arm. And now I recognize this is more of a minor inconvenience, but this had a huge impact on my parents. They could not have prepared to have a child with a disability, but they have a great perspective, and they've dealt with that better than I think any parent could have, and for that I'm forever grateful. But when I was about a year old, they really have a sense of humor about it. I had this cast that went all the way up my arm because I just had a minor surgery on these two fingers which separated them. So this cast went all the way up my arm and completely covered my hand. So when the doctor had to remove the cast, she couldn't tell that I was actually already missing a hand. And that's when my parents freaked out and said, "Why did you just amputate our child?" Yeah. I heard this story when I was about 11 years old, and I thought it was absolutely hilarious. This was a time when I think at 11 years old, many of us are a little bit insecure about ourselves, and I was pretty insecure about my amputation. But I realized that humor would be a good way to make people feel comfortable with a very difficult subject. And what better way to do so when you're an amputee and have many prosthetic limbs than on Halloween? Yeah. I couldn't tell you how many times I've been Captain Hook. Now, see this is a hand that I had so that I could cover up my amputation because it was clear that I was a little bit insecure about who I was. I wanted to hide who I actually am. And, this didn't really serve much of a useful purpose. It really limited my ability. But since then, I've had many prosthetics that have allowed me to do many things I otherwise would not be able to do, such as kayaking. As you can see on the screen over here, that is my prosthetic right here. So it completely covers my hand. And the big contrast between this prosthetic and the one I had just showed you as a Halloween decoration is this really shows everybody that I am missing a hand. When I'm on the water, everybody can see that I'm missing a hand. And in hockey, I also use a prosthetic as well, but you can't really see it from inside the glove. So it's my top left hand on the stick, and this is essentially what you're not seeing on the inside. It goes around my wrist, and there's a hook that I can use to control it. And my dad invented this, actually. My dad's been a great help in inventing all these prosthetics. They've allowed me to do many incredible things I otherwise would not be able to do, but there is one big drawback. Whether you're missing an arm or a leg, prosthetics cost about an arm and a leg. So they've allowed me to do many incredible things. This year I became the first one-handed kayaker to win a race at the Canadian Sprint Kayaking Championships. And that was an incredible experience. And I've been able to play with the Canadian amputee hockey team, as you saw in that past picture. And for those of you who don't know, the only difference between the hockey we see in the NHL and the hockey we see in amputee hockey is in amputee hockey, everybody's missing a limb. So you can see the irony in having to shake hands at the end of every game. On the other hand, amputee hockey fights are infinitely more entertaining because you don't see us dropping our gloves. We actually dismember ourselves. It's really fantastic. It's great because everybody's completely accepting of each other's different abilities. But in kayaking, it's a little bit different. Everybody can see that I have one hand. So when I race, I kind of like this because if I win a race, I know that I was able to do what someone else couldn't do with two hands with one. And on the other side, when they lose a race to me, they just lost to a one-handed kayaker, which I imagine is a pretty awkward experience. It's fantastic, but there are some drawbacks to using prosthetics as well. At Nationals, I had one little child come up to me and say, it's kind of weird that you have that thing on your hand, or that you have to use a bigger boat, which you have to use if you're racing in the para category, which I do. And to be honest with you, it's not entirely their fault. Society still sees disability as a weird and unusual way to be. Yet 1 billion people, an estimated 1 billion people in this world, have some form of disability. So think about how many people you see every day who have some form of disability, be it in your social circles at work. Chances are you're not seeing very many of them. And I've been able to see many because I worked with the War Amps of Canada. I continue to work with the War Amps of Canada. And if you're not familiar with them, they've been helping Canadian amputees since the end of the First World War. And one day at the War Amps, I met a man named Chris. And you wouldn't know it just by looking at him, but Chris is missing both his arms and both his legs. And when I met Chris, he was sitting at a boardroom table, and he was texting. So everybody in the audience, go like this with your elbows. All right, now using only your elbows, I want you to try and grab your phone and send a friend a text. It's not very easy, is it? But to Chris, this is just how he does things. And when I saw this, I wished everybody could see this side of disability. Because if Chris can text with his elbows, then he clearly has an ability far greater than any of us in this room. But this is not the side of disability that we are seeing. We see the depressing side, the side where people look at a disability and say, I'd rather be dead than have that happen to me. Yet people like Chris are some of the happiest and most successful people I have ever met. Just look at that smile. So when you think of disability, who comes to mind? Are you thinking of people like me or people like Chris? What about others like Nick Newell and Jim Abbott, who are two amputees, and despite their differences, they're professional athletes? Do you think of people like us? Or do words like crippled and incapable come to mind? Because we are all living proof that to be disabled does not mean we are incapable, yet society's perspective would have us all believe that we are. This is why we need to change the way we see disability. So we are not seeing it as something that is weird and unusual, and so we can start seeing disability as something that is indeed different, but a part of everyday life. Because whether you like it or not, at some point in your own life, you will encounter a time where you will have to do things differently. So we need to rebrand disability as a different ability. If we rebrand disability as something that is different, we'll see more people like me comfortable with who they are, and we'll be more comfortable talking about it in conversation. And then who knows? Maybe one day we'll see that girl from the train accident, and she'll be back on the news because she has a different ability. The reporters they'll be talking about who she's become and what she can do. She'll be happy, but let's just hope that she's not a Leafs fan. Thank you.